Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Amit Harari, and coming up in today's newscast, it's the 9th straight week of mass protests in Israel, and there's no end in sight. Meantime, the U.S. already opposing Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich's visit to the U.S., coming after his slip of tongue. And it's time to dress up. Purim is just around the corner as Israeli children are showing off their beautiful costumes at school. Hundreds of thousands of protesters rallied across Israel last night in the 9th straight week of mass demonstrations against the government's planned judicial overhaul. An estimated 160,000 rallied in Tel Aviv and many thousand more in dozens of locations around the country. ILTV Steve Leibovich reports.
There were concerns after clashes with police this week in Tel Aviv, but protests were almost entirely law-abiding and peaceful last night, with only minor clashes with police on the Ayalon highway in Tel Aviv, resulting in the arrest of 4 people. Another 4 were arrested in Jerusalem at a protest near the Prime Minister's residence. No injuries were reported. Despite calls from President Herzog and a bipartisan appeal from 4 Knesset members, there has been no pause in coalition moves to advance legislation that would bring dramatic change to the Israeli legal system. Knesset Speaker Amir Ohana called a special session today to allow coalition initiatives to move forward. The plenum is expected to vote on postponing a March 15th deadline for selecting Knesset representatives to the Judicial Selection Committee, which is in charge of appointing judges. The protests apparently swelled due to resentment over comments from within the government calling them anarchists. The protest outside the president's house was attended by many thousands of people. All of them had one thing in common. They want to live in a democracy, in a Jewish state, yes, that's also democratic. What are you hoping is going to be the result of this protest tonight? What would you like to see happen by tomorrow morning?
That Israel will remain a democracy, and that all the citizens in Israel will fight for human rights, for minority rights, that we will own up to all the things that Israel really are. We'll fight for equality and for democracy and all the things that democracy stands for.
The rally outside the president's residence concluded with the singing of Hatikva.
This story is about hearing the different voices in this complex matter named the judicial overhaul. And after many previous open letters by academics in opposition to the reform, this time a new petition being signed requesting something a little different. 120 academics signing a petition at the end of the week supporting the judicial reform. The academics, including professors, researchers, and administrators from the Technion Israel Institute of Technology, the Weizmann Institute of Science, the University of Haifa, Bar Ilan University, Tel Aviv University, the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and Ben Gurion University. The letter being divided into 4 sections in which is written, the legislative procedures in Israel give great scope for discussion, precision, and persuasion. The requested place to discuss the details of the reform is the Israeli Knesset, and there should be discussions of matters between the supporters of the reform and its opponents, as is customary. Furthermore, adding, it is good to hold as many talks possible and strive for broad agreements, but we must not harm the essential process of correcting the judicial system, which is in recent years has excessively withdrawn the limits of the other authorities. The initiative being supported by Israel Prize Laureate Professor Israel Aumann, speaking on Thursday at the Knesset Constitution, Law and Justice Committee sessions on the reforms. Aumann also pushing for change in the composition of the Judge Selection Committee, but advising against the override clause over concern of checks and balances and separation of powers between authorities. Moreover, the signatories noting that many more academics are supporting the reform, with many more willing to sign the petition. And joining us now with more on the government's legal challenges and judicial reform future, telling us maybe what's to be expected, is a legal affairs correspondent with the Jerusalem Post, Michael Starr. Michael, what do you think prompted today's sudden invitation from Judicial Overhaul architects, Justice Minister Levine and Law Committee Chair Simcha Rotman to the opposition to come to the president's residence to talk?
Well, in my conversations with Rothman and statements from the pro-reform camp, they've generally been expressed an openness to negotiations at the president's office. The problem seems to be getting both sides there at the same time. The opposition camp has repeatedly said that they're not willing to begin negotiations until legislative process ends. And this was repeated again today, both by the Yesh Atid party as well as by protest organizers. The question is if who's willing to buckle first? Who's willing to put down their preconditions first and come to the table? As of yet, the reform side seems unwilling to stop the legislative process. Just today, we had the second half of the vote to send another judicial reform bill, this time on judicial review and on override, to the Knesset. It was the revision vote. It was complete, it passed. It's going to be sent to the Knesset. So we just had a continuation of the legislative process today. We saw no less than 3 different initiatives today to try to bring both sides to the table on Tuesday, it doesn't seem like either side is willing to buckle. The opposition still seems ready to push forward with protests and not relent with its demands that legislation end.
Now, could you please give us a quick update? I mean, how far along are the main components of the planned judicial overhaul? Like, what's expected in the near future?
Well, in the near future, we're going to see a preliminary vote for the most recent legislation that was moved forward on override clause and limitation of judicial review. We're going to see in the Constitution Law and Justice Committee, they're going to prepare the previous judicial reform bill, which was on the Judge Selection Committee, and the restriction on judicial review in regards to the basic laws. It's going to be ready for further readings. And then we also have kind of the tangential laws, which some connect to the judicial review. There's the Dairy Law 2 and the entrenchment bill, which are on the special committee for amendments to the basic law of government. One being a restriction of judicial review of ministerial appointments is in relation to Shas Chairman Aryeh Deri's appointment to a ministerial position, which was previously vetoed by the High Court of Justice. And then there's also the alteration of the conditions for when a prime minister is deemed unfit for service, specifying that it is only for medical and health situations. So we have those going forward, and people are also expecting Justice Minister Levine to present more aspects of the plans as things go forward. We're still waiting for legislation on the reasonableness clause. We're still waiting on some sort of legislation regarding the Attorney General, that office, and for restrictions on legal advisors, government legal advisors. But deadlines, legislation haven't been put